Okay, so I'm going to talk to you today about this blue blob over here, so Lake Michigan. This is a unique Sea Grant project that was focusing on shoreline erosion, and it was funded through actually 3 different Sea Grants, so Michigan Sea Grant, Wisconsin Sea Grant, and then Illinois, Indiana Sea Grant. So there's a lot of collaborators. On the Purdue side, we have myself, and then we have Aaron Thompson, who is a social scientist and works in the landscape architecture department. And then, of course, the students did all the work, and we just take the credit. So the motivation for the project, this project began in early 2020, which was interesting. So Lake Michigan water levels are shown here. So I'm showing you the Lake Michigan water levels from 1903 to present. And what happened in 2013 is that we started in this dramatic period of water level increase, right? And so we increased the water level 2 meters, which is about this high, over 7 years, which is the full recorded range of water levels for Lake Michigan. So if you followed the news, you saw a lot of houses falling into the lake, things like that, right? A lot of shoreline erosion, all sorts of stuff. And to some degree, or to a large degree, everybody was caught off guard because we had this 20-year period of very low water levels right there. So everyone was saying, okay, climate change, the new norm, the lake levels are going down, we're not going to have any water. And then all of a sudden now everyone's saying, climate change, the new normal, everything is going to get deeper. And the short answer is we don't know what climate change is going to do to lake levels. But we were caught off guard, and this project was funded in the wake of that period. And, you know, you think 2 meters doesn't seem like that much. You look down at the lake, 2 meters doesn't seem like a lot. But for comparison, sea level rise, we're talking about, you know, a historical rate of like a foot per century, right? So this is 2 meters in 7 years. Next slide, so to speak. So some of the questions that we're looking at, there's a lot of questions. Some of them are social related. I'm not going to go into those. I'm just going to focus on my little part of the project. Which parts of Lake Michigan, so this was, you know, a lake-wide project, have high erosion potential? Where is the sediment being trapped as it moves along the lakeshore? What can we learn from existing sediment budgets for Lake Michigan? This question related to small structures. So how do many small structures placed along the lakefront add up to cause shoreline problems? We don't really have the small structures here along the Indiana Dunes lakeshore because of the regulations. But if you look at Michigan and Wisconsin, you have a lot of these individual structures that homeowners will put on their shoreline to try to protect their particular property. And over a large stretch of shoreline, that will add up to problems. Related to the first question, which parts of Lake Michigan have high erosion potential? Right there is one of the biggest problem areas right out here in the lake. We have Burns Harbor, which is this massive human-made peninsula that sticks out into the lake here. The sand wants to move along the lakeshore from east to west along the Indiana lakeshore because of its orientation relative to the big waves which come from the north. And so you have these erosion areas downdrift or downstream, so to speak, of these massive structures. So if you see all this stone here, a lot of it was actually placed in 2020 because this area is devoid of the sand that normally replenishes the sand that it loses to its neighbors to the west. Next slide. So having started our project in 2020 with a lot of plans for exotic field work, we shifted to space. So this was an unexpected thing that came out of the project, but we started looking at how do we detect shoreline changes using some of the newer high-resolution multispectral satellite imagery, okay? So there's these new satellites out there that can do multispectral imagery at like 3 to 5, meter resolution. And we developed this algorithm to automatically detect the shoreline at very high spatial and temporal resolution, which was a great boon to our effort. Go ahead. So one of the other outcomes that works in lockstep with that satellite imagery, what I'm showing you here is a model of the shoreline position for West Beach, which is farther to the west. And basically, if you go up on this graph, the shoreline is advancing into the lake. If you go down, the shoreline is retreating. This is the period of 2013 to 2020 where the shoreline retreated at West Beach as the water level rose. The stars are this high-resolution satellite imagery that we were able to infer from the algorithm we developed. And we developed this model to try and predict how the shoreline changes in response to waves and water levels. And you can see the model is doing a really great job, and this is something that we're publishing right now. Next slide. So the final steps, we're writing papers from the project. We're trying to coordinate, across the other 2 Sea Grant partners. We're interpreting the findings in light of the social science that we have. And then I think the next step is to really trying to step this up for more funding, and then hopefully communicate some of the results to the broader public. So thank you.